So welcome to the Node.js Security Working Group meeting for November 2nd, 2017. Just looking at the standard agenda we have here. Let me find where that is. Okay, here we go. I don't think there were any issues on the agenda, so maybe the first thing to do is to make a call for things that people want to add to the agenda. Are there things? I have a couple, like maybe I'll start by I want to add in just to go over the member expectations and the issue I opened for people to acknowledge their understanding. What was the other one?
There was third-party vulnerability management using HackerOne listed in the issue.
Yes,
okay.
Reed from HackerOne is here tonight to help us discuss that.
Okay, yep. That's great. So yeah, that's on the agenda.
Also, bug bounty programs.
Say that again. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at the things that are tagged with the label.
Okay. Yeah. What was the other one?
It looks like 3 things. So 1 is proposing an early disclosure program. 2 is bug bounty program for Node issues. And 3 is CV management process for Node.js.
Okay. Program, CV management program, and bug bounty. And add when we got the minutes, we'll try and add the proper links, but I'm just adding it to the Any other things people want to add in? Security.
Do we want to add it? Specifically, do we want to talk about so membership to security teams?
Membership, we can just secure up, just add that on the agenda. Let's talk a bit about that. Okay. There was an agenda item on reviewing the last working group meeting. I'm not sure that. Is there anything people want to talk about on that front? If not, I'd suggest we move on to.
Michael, this is Arunesh. So one of the things I was talking to James and I wanted to understand if there's an agenda here to come up with a membership criteria for the triage team. Is that something we are working towards?
I put that as one of the issues on the agenda, so let's hit that when we get to that.
Okay.
We can look. I think there's some issues. I don't know off the top of my head. We can go look and then see, discuss what we should do on that front.
Okay.
Okay. I think so. If we then, unless anybody has anything else to add, we might start with the HackerOne discussion, especially since we have a guest here to help take us through that. I think.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so you want to take take that away?
Well, I'm happy to jump in, but it's from my understanding, it's basically twofold here. Is one, getting using HackerOne basically to manage third-party node modules, so security issues in third-party node modules, and then also eventually, hopefully, actually having Node.js core issues as well. And then separately as well, we can, from a HackerOne perspective, wearing my internet bug bounty hat, we're also happy to offer bounties for Node.js core issues as well as part of a bug bounty program.
Okay, so actually I think my understanding was that we were going to set up HackerOne to start with, well, for Node Core as well.
Yeah, that's it. We've got two HackerOne accounts, one for Node Core and one for third parties.
Right. So did you want to give a demo of any of that, or?
Is that a question for me? Yes.
Yeah, I guess for Vladimir, that'd be his question for you.
Okay. So sure, I'm not certain how I can share my screen, but
There is a button on the, if you go to the left-hand side and hover over the left, it should pop out a thing where there's a little green screen with an arrow on it.
yes, got it. Let me just open HackerOne.
Because that would let us, let you show us what you've already set up, which would be great.
Mm. Here it is. So, usual question, are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Oh, nice. So, I don't have a very good connection in Paris right now, so, oh, here it is. So, basically, the triage team on HackerOne will have this box view. Vulnerabilities will happen on the left-hand side of the. I clicked on something. Vulnerabilities will be okay. Here it is. Will be shown here, and you can get details regarding them by just clicking on them as on any inbox. So when vulnerability, that's the workflow I will suggest for the triage team, for both triage teams. Basically, we can report from the security guy who discovered the vulnerability. Regarding the ecosystem, we will create scopes. We will create assets linked to any package for which we have vulnerability disclosed. I believe the core triage team will also set up something similar on that topic, but with assets linked to the Node core components. And after that, you can actually triage a vulnerability if you've got enough information to decide if it is a real vulnerability or not. And HackerOne is really well done because we can invite participants who are not even members of the team to join the discussion on a specific vulnerability, which means, for instance, we will be able to invite package maintainers directly to interact with the person who have found the vulnerability and reported it to us. And then
how do you invite them? Is it just via email?
I think so, yes. That's what my understanding of it. Or a username, or a HackerOne username.
So, but I guess I'm wondering, like, yeah, okay, so it's an OR, so you don't have to have a HackerOne username.
Yeah.
Okay.
Reed, does that create a HackerOne account if I invite someone by his username?
It does not create an account, but they have to create one in order to access the report. So it sends them an invite.
Okay. Also, HackerOne help us manage the full life cycle of the vulnerability from its reporting to its disclosure. And for instance, I will take this vulnerability, consider it as triaged, and change its state. Know that it has been triaged. We can safely work on fixing the situation if needed. And you can also close the report should you want it. For instance, if what has been reported is not a vulnerability, we should be able to say not applicable and close this report. But we can also consider it as resolved when a patch has been issued. And that's where it gets interesting to us because after a vulnerability is resolved, we can perform a disclosure of the vulnerability, and this disclosure can be full or limited, which means we can provide an executive summary of the vulnerability. That will be the only thing that will be made public after the vulnerability is disclosed, which means all the discussions with the security guy and the package maintainer can remain private should we want it. And at the end of the workflow, when public disclosure is made, we will get out of HackerOne and run a script I wrote yesterday and still finishing. Run a script that will actually convert the HackerOne vulnerability through the API to our format, to the format of the vulnerability we already have in the repository.
Sorry, so which is that? You mean the JSON the JSON format we have, or something else?
No, that JSON format, yes.
Okay, so it'll actually be the JSON. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah. So that would remove us from having to manually populate that, right?
Yes. So based on what I did, there are still a few things I did not manage to do directly from HackerOne, like choosing the version of the package that are vulnerable or which are not vulnerable. But I do believe that since HackerOne allows us to create a template for vulnerabilities, we could put that in the template of vulnerability report and pass that later to have a detail automated, or maybe add them by hand when disclosing.
Right. Okay.
Is there any other question on the interface? Yes.
I guess what are sort of the next steps in getting this into place? So you've done some configuration. Do you need to write up a document that sort of describes how you configured it specifically for us, or is this all sort of vanilla?
It's still very vanilla right now. My idea was waiting for the PR regarding management of third party to land, and to have the triage teams set up and getting used to the tool, because maybe they will have other concerns or update to the workflow. But the workflow is pretty vanilla, and according to me suits the need I believe we have at the moment.
Right. So you have a PR for third-party vulnerability process. Is that related to using it for core as well?
I haven't been really involved in the core part. I mostly worked on the third party, but I also have access to the core organization named Node.js itself. And I believe once we have set up the triage team for core, we will have the same process.
Right. So that's just sort of what okay. So I understand, the PR and the stuff for the third-party vulnerability all makes sense. The core one is just the one I was wondering how we make sure that we get that going. We have, we know the people who are currently triaging them. They're on this page. Let me just paste that. So they're on this page here. So the question is okay, do we need to create accounts for those 6 people, explain to them how to use it? What do we need to do to get moving forward on that front?
I can invite all of them in the organization and perform a demo for them, and probably remove myself from the organization after that. But yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Set up a meeting. Probably need to get one of them to volunteer to kind of be the admin, like you said, and then take it from there.
Well, I can stay the admin, but I have no legitimacy to be in this team at the moment. So the next step also is to update the website to have people performing reports to the email addresses configured with HackerOne. We need to do that too, or directly to HackerOne.
Well, yeah, I think we've got email aliases. So I think what we would do is just redirect that one to direct it to HackerOne. Is that's possible?
I think so.
I mean, I know it's possible to redirect the email alias as long as there isn't any other special requirement for, what happens in the email or anything like that.
Okay. Reed, do you have a definitive answer on that?
Yeah, you can definitely. So we support email forwarding, and so you can hook up security at Node.js.org. So what it does is basically any emails that get sent to that address get created as draft reports in the HackerOne program, and it sends them an email back, just with a link to click to finish up the report. And so it takes all the content of the body of the email and like pre-populates that in the report, but then allows them to select other things, and then you can submit the report that way.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like the next step is if you could set up a meeting and take those existing members through how they're going to use it.
Yes.
And once they're all have accounts and are comfortable, we're ready to go, then I can easily update the email alias to point to that.
Yes, makes sense.
Okay.
Also, we'll need to create, I assume we need to create another email alias for the third parties.
Right. So you can actually submit a PR to the Node.js/email repo.
Okay.
And just in there, there's a format that says like, okay, this email address forward to this email address. It'll be pretty obvious when you take a look there.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, if you submit a PR there, if you copy me, I'll that'll alert me to take a look, and we can get that in there too.
Quick functional question related to the question on the sidebar, the one alias versus two aliases. Is it easy or possible to move from one HackerOne org to another HackerOne org if they all consolidated in one and then were parsed out, moved at that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. You still have to have somebody that does that work, but we do support the like a hierarchy, program hierarchy, where you can move issues or reports between programs.
Thank you. That might make it easier than forcing somebody to know which alias to address it to.
Yeah, that was one. Like, I know I don't remember the full discussion, but it's like, yeah, we could potentially say there's just this one alias. I mean, one simple approach is we could actually have them routed to both HackerOne installations, but now I guess we don't want to do that because that exposes stuff.
We want the core vulnerability to be accessible only to the core team, and we don't want to spam them with the whole.
Yeah.
Or maybe they won't, but I won't assume this to be really comfortable to them.
I think having two makes sense to me because it's going to be really two different groups of people looking at each set, right?
Yes, I think so, yes.
And least privilege kind of says, yeah, we should just. So did you have an idea of what it would be like? Security-modules or whatever at Node.js.org, something like that?
Node ecosystem, maybe. I'm not really sure. That's
maybe think about that, and whatever you PR in, we'll probably get some comments and suggestions in the review of that PR.
Yes, looks good to me.
I think if there's two, that people will, at least some number of people are going to use the wrong one. It's not necessarily. It's not going to necessarily be clear to people, though. Like they will report FS, so they're going to report something about the FS, the module FS. So they'll report it to modules, which means that from a security point of view, there's a good chance that the reports will go to the wrong team. So we have to trust both teams, I think, even if there's two. Again, I don't feel really strongly about this, but I feel like if it all went to core, and core looked at it and we're like, okay, that's not a core thing. That's a third-party module thing. I'm going to press two buttons and assign it to the third-party module team, and now we're done because we don't have to worry about it anymore. That it would be.
Is it that easy to transfer between HackerOne instances?
Yeah, you just go in there to, I forget what the option is, but it's just go to the drop down, click an option, and then it's like transfer report, and you just select the team. So it would be, Node security rather than Node.js or something. I forget what it is called. And then you just submit, and it moves the report to that team.
Okay, so I guess what we should just maybe validate based on Sam's suggestion is like, are the people doing the triage happy to do that? In which case, having it all go to one might make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would again check with them, because you're then adding the burden of now that they're going to be getting all these issues for third-party stuff that they
Yes.
haven't been previously.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So maybe Valimir, when you set up the meeting to sort of go through how to use it, that could be one of the discussion topics.
Yes.
You could do it the other way as well. Like it could go to third party and they could reassign to core. But I think even if there were two, like I don't trust. I mean, I've seen bug reports before, and people tend to randomly submit bug reports.
Yeah, if there's two, I guess it's like, then, you only have to deal with the exceptions where they got it wrong.
Right. But if we're concerned about leakage of information across boundaries, to set up two boxes and say it's a real, if we considered it to be a real security problem for the third parties to see a core vulnerability first because it was misfiled.
Right.
If we did consider that a problem, then even just having two boxes means we're going to get that problem.
Yes.
If we don't consider it a problem and we're just like, it's a best effort, maybe people will put things in the right boxes by themselves. And if every once in a while they get it wrong, the team just transfers it to the other team. If that's what happens and everybody's happy, like they trust both teams to occasionally see the wrong thing, then two boxes I think is fine.
Yeah, so the other piece to this, maybe not today immediately, but if we do it and do it for 6 months, I would bet we get enough information to have a very simple algorithm pop them into the right boxes. Because we're going to get module names or suggested module names that we can programmatically identify. I should hope.
Could be. We'll certainly see if there's any problems with the existing system.
So I definitely agree. Okay. So it seems to me like, we need the feedback from the existing security team triaging to see what they would prefer. Like, would they prefer they all come to them and they can forward them on, or do they, prefer that absolutely doesn't happen? I guess in terms of the security, maybe after talking to them, we should put an issue somewhere for the TSE or in the greater community to just say, this is what we're proposing. This is the risk. Like, like you said, there's a risk that they'll go to the wrong one, but we think it's still the right answer because of X. And just based on that input, we'll choose whether to have one or two. Make sense?
Yes, looks good to me, yes.
Okay. Okay, anything more we should talk about HackerOne then today?
Well, again, from the HackerOne perspective, I'm also happy to talk about the bug bounty stuff, especially since the Internet Bug Bounty, which is a not-for-profit that HackerOne supports and helps run, is also offering to provide bounties for Node.js core issues.
Right. So yeah, I think we had another issue on the agenda. So why don't we just flip to that one? So why don't you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can just talk about it from the perspective. So not only do I work for HackerOne as the director of security, but I'm also on the Internet Bug Bounties panel, and which is made up of security folks from a bunch of different tech companies. And so basically, we at the Internet Bug Bounty, provide bounties to open source projects that have internet-wide, internet-facing vulnerabilities. And so, like, this would be, for example, OpenSSL, and like we have the entire Ruby community right now, everything from Ruby to Rails to Ruby gems, Python, Perl, PHP, a lot of other languages as well, Apache, Nginx. And so we just want to add Node.js issues to that as well, but specifically just the core issues. So this wouldn't be for third-party modules, but just for severe issues in Node.js core.
And I guess how many issues does that start to find usually when that happens?
Again, it's hard to say, just depending on like what already is being found and like how secure an application is. But it does create incentive for researchers to poke a little more. And it's not that much money. I think that our highest tier for just like a critical issue is we would pay out around $1,500. And so we just do this as not something that is trying to pay top dollar, but as our way of kind of giving back to the community, to the researchers that are finding these issues and have been finding them for free, but maybe incentivize them to like, okay, if I find much, then I can get some money then for it, get rewarded. And so I think generally our tiers have been like, there's the minimum's like 500 and there's like $1,000 tier and a 1,500, and it can go more than 1,500, just depends on the issue. If you look at, I'm in a Lyft right now, but if you look at hackerone.com/Ruby, you can see the Ruby program and see how some of their payouts have been over time. And there's a table on their page too that says like how the issues are categorized. And so we would just map that to, again, this is all, the way the IBB works is it's all post issue. So like even if Node.js were not using HackerOne, basically once an issue has been fixed and a CVE has been assigned, then the IBB then goes and provides the payout to the researcher. So it's done as a post fix type of thing. And
right.
So we lean on the projects themselves, so Node.js in this case, to decide the severity of the issue. And so we don't actually see the issue ahead of time in most cases. So it's just done on like, okay, you found this researcher found this issue, it's this type of severity, maps to this, what this payout range, and so then we provide the bounty.
Right. I'm looking at the issue that was opened, and some of it was around, I think, what was an expected cost. Is there a cost to the project, or it almost sounds like you're volunteering to do that, right?
Yeah, we're providing this at no cost to Node.js.
And that's HackerOne?
That's the Internet Bug Bounty.
Okay, Internet.
Yeah, if you go to internetbugbounty.org, you can check it out.
Okay, so that's a good thing to clarify. It wouldn't cost anything, so we don't need to get funding or anything like that. I think on our side, the main concern is like, are we set up to handle extra influx of issues, right?
That's correct, yes.
Any concerns, comments from the group?
So to be clear, this would only be for security vulnerabilities, not arbitrary bugs. And also, specifically, this has to be things going through HackerOne, or what if they're low severity vulnerabilities that don't end up even going through HackerOne?
It doesn't have to go through HackerOne at all, but again, it does need to meet some minimum bar, and I forget what that is. If you look at the Ruby program, there's like a bar as far as like the payouts go, and so we'd map the same thing based off how Node kind of ranks its issues.
Cool.
I mean, I think, from my perspective, it seems like a good idea. It's just about timing. Like, I think we'd want to get our HackerOne set up before we did it. Anybody else have like things that we should sort of do first, or?
Do we need TSC approval?
Yeah, I think, well, that was sort of separate. I was thinking us as a group, if we came up with like, okay, we should do X, Y, and Z first, then I think we should have a proposal that goes and says, we'd like to do this, and send it up to the TSC to say, yeah, okay, this looks good or not. And I guess, do we have somebody volunteering in this group to put that proposal together? Because I think we need somebody to kind of just put together, look at the the Ruby one, and pull together a little bit of an explanation of how it would work and those kinds of things, and then document it in an issue we can put on the TSC agenda.
I'm looking for the end of the year kind of time frame. I could do that. I can't do it before sort of end of year.
I think we want to get our HackerOne set up anyway first, which is probably going to take a few weeks. So I don't think that's out of line. So that's Michael. What's your last name?
Alexander.
Okay, so Michael Alexander volunteered.
And Michael, I'm happy to help provide any information you need. So feel free to reach out.
Sure. Thank you, Reed.
Yeah, so I'm just taking note that Michael Alexander volunteered to champion this on the security work group, likely with an end of year time frame. Okay, now that sounds good. Anybody have any other comments or things we should talk about on this issue before we move on to the next agenda item? No, okay. I'm going to flip back to our, so we basically have covered off the first one and one of the lower ones. But anyway, the next one I'd see is proposing an early disclosure program. So that is issue number 58. So I think James was the one who put it onto the agenda. And there's been some discussion in the item. Does anybody want to sort of lead the discussion on that one? The one thing I will mention on that is we have documented, Sam put together the PR to document the expectations that had been discussed, which is basically that, you know, people should not share things outside the security repo. That's landed. Not related to this one specifically, but and we might as well talk about it as a related thing. I did open issue 64, which is asking people to acknowledge that they've basically read that if your name is on the list. I know there was a little bit of discussion last week how we would, you know, normally we would ask people to PR themselves in. This is a bootstrap. I just wanted to throw it out there so that people know, and you know, if people have other suggestions on how we should raise awareness, or if you think that's a, you know, a reasonable way to go. It looks like I can see we're already getting quite a lot of people acknowledging, which is good. So any other comments or suggestions, or like, is everybody comfortable with that as a, you know, once we get the acts from that list of people, that's good enough in terms of people are aware and we now have that that basic policy in place?
It's good to me. And as far as the early access program, I feel like that kind of has to go into the TSC or the board for that.
Yeah, sorry, I was scoping it just to, you know, that question was like, have we covered off that people who are now in theory constrained to not being able to release information, you know, we're comfortable that they're aware and everybody's going to follow that going forward.
Yeah, if everybody posts a comment in the issue, I think that's going to be helpful. And there was some talk of like legally binding signatures and stuff like that.
I think that's separate. I think that's once we flip back to the actual early disclosure program, which maybe let's do that. Then is, yeah, there, I think if there's going to be a formal agreement, somebody would have to draft that. And
I heard a few people suggest signing non-disclosure agreements or whatever, even for the internal stuff. To me, that feels like more paperwork than we need to handle. I mean, does anybody disagree? Are we cool with just it on GitHub and that's good enough? I am.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with the GitHub thing, but yeah, it'd be interesting what other people think.
Yeah, as long as there's some kind of acknowledgement, I think that's good enough.
How do people get on this list, by the way?
That we'll get to that as a separate discussion.
Okay.
So is there anybody like think we should do something more different, or is, you know, what we've got there in that issue good enough?
enough for me.
Okay, so I guess I'll, at this point, I'll say we've agreed it's good enough. We'll go through and do that. And if, as always, these things are always changeable. So if somebody thinks we should be doing something different, open up an issue to discuss. In terms of the early disclosure program, I think some of the key discussion there, at least for me, is around what we'd actually be what we'd be disclosing. Like, there's discussion of binaries. I think that, I know that people build, like Google, I don't know about Google, but like we build our own versions of it, NodeSource does. So actually getting access to the patches in advance would be what is needed for that versus binaries. So there could be a bunch of different facets on that. What are people's thoughts in terms of like how much should be included in the early disclosure program?
Well, what would be the most useful to those stakeholders?
To me, as the IBM stakeholder, would definitely be the actual security patches themselves, so we could apply them in our internal repos, build binaries. Obviously, not release those binaries until the Node.js ones went live, but have the option to be able to release them at the same day. For other people, I think, like some cloud providers that just use the community binaries directly, just having the binaries themselves would be more useful.
Makes sense. I've been talking with a French hosting solution, and they were actually super interested in the opportunity of being granted the binaries like 24 hours or 2 days before the end of the embargo to protect their customers from day one. That's the only use case I'm fully aware of right now.
So today, are the binaries even built before, close to the end of the embargo?
They tend to be built very much just before we release them, for the simple reason that we only have one main CI to be able to test them without disclosing it. We test them in the main CI, and so we shut it down so that people other than a limited set can't access it. And so adding an extra, we'd have to do that a day earlier and basically leave the CI locked out for an extra day to make that reasonable.
So I think the simplest solution here might be that the patches are the only thing that would be included in the early disclosure.
Certainly the patches would be much easier to manage as a start anyway. Now I do see that there were some
that has resistance.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just reading the notes and going to represent that has resistance on the
right
tracking.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but that one was the thing that people seem to be most concerned about.
Right. So I'm prefacing that with if we choose to go down that road.
Right. So I don't know if we're going to come to a resolution in this meeting. I think it was sort of an awareness. If people do have, are there points that people want to make, or should we take it back to GitHub to continue the discussion on what and if should be included?
Maybe we should invite concerned parties publicly to, people who would be interested in that to state their need or interest in that to have a better understanding of any person who would want those binaries or patch or even security data available because of embargo.
No, that's a good idea. Do we have a volunteer for somebody to coordinate, gathering that group of people together to gather that data?
I can open a GitHub issue and with a bit of Twitter and other magic, we can try to have those people made aware of.
Of the issue, yeah. Okay, so that's Vladimir who's volunteering, right?
Yes.
Was to get more input from the potential consumers. We'll put together an issue, Twitter, etc., to try to gather that input. Okay, no, yeah, that's good, because that would definitely. Oops. Right. Okay. Anything else we should talk about on that topic?
I don't know that we need to talk about it, but another item that does throw into my mind is this is not, strictly speaking, just limited to a security aspect. I don't know whether this body has to decide versus kicking it to the CTC and asking for that input. I mean, making the proposal for the this and this side or that side, even to argue a case, because I'm not sure that this group's going to come to a unanimous consensus.
Yeah, I think we need to try to come to as close to a consensus as we can. And if we're really stuck, then maybe we can get some TSC input. But generally, you know, what goes to the TSC should have fairly good question, like specific question.
Yeah, it's not to that point yet. I'm just looking at the strength of conviction from people in the community, active and not attending these calls, not necessarily going to participate in this venue.
Yeah, no, good point. Okay, yeah, we're down to 10 minutes, so let's move on. CV management program, I think I probably put that on the list. I think at this point it's really just for information, if anything, because I landed a first draft, well, the first version of the process being that we're going to use to manage the CVE numbers and act as a CNA. So let me see if that issue is even still open, because if it is, I should probably close it. Right. Okay, so I'm going to close it. So basically, you know, if it's been out there, it was reviewed. So if you have any comments, you can PR, you know, suggest PRs to the processes. We got our first block of CVEs, so we should basically be ready to go. So is there any other questions or discussion on that topic before we move on to the next one?
So to be clear, that is only for core and not for third-party modules, right?
That is only for core, yeah. The suggestion was we'll start with doing it for core, understand the process, see how it works, and then if we want to do it for core, you know, for modules as well, we could look at assigning our scope. Basically, it's when you become a CNA, you define a scope. We define it as, you know, everything under the Node.js Foundation org. But we could expand that scope to include modules if we decide we want to do that too.
And also, if you use HackerOne, anything that goes through HackerOne or even kind of tangentially related to your program, we can assign CVs as well. And so Adam Baldwin just sent me a list of 420 modules that were done through the Node security project for security issues. And so I'm assigning CVs for all those under the HackerOne CNA.
So that's certainly another, you know, approach we could take with the third-party module. So I guess it's like once we have a little bit more experience handling the reports, maybe we can make the best decision on that front. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we already covered bug bounty program. We talked about acknowledging the privacy of info in private repos. So membership to security teams. Do we have an issue that is covering that? I think there. I don't see one in our security working group repo. We probably should open one. There has been some discussion somewhere else, but it's. So I guess it's Arunish and Hitesh, you were asking about that. So do you want to start the discussion on that front?
Yeah, so you know, today, myself, Hitesh, here as an observer to understand what the process is here. And in some conversation outside of the meeting here, we got exposed to the possibility that there is a new process being worked on for membership to the security triage team, and getting access to the disclosure. And certainly that is something of interest to us. And another member of our team, Josh Brown, who was trying to actually get on this call, but he couldn't. He works at the security team here at Microsoft, and we wanted to kind of see if we will be able to help out. Setting up some triage process for the vulnerabilities, as the HackerOne demo showed. So yeah, I mean, our interest is just to kind of see what the process is, and if there's a way we can apply for that.
Right. So I guess, yeah, I'm not on that group today. I know that it's been rather ad hoc so far. In terms of who's on it, right? Like, it's been generally TSC members who have volunteered.
Yeah.
But I think it's open for discussion. And we can if we have somebody in this group who kind of wants to champion writing down what the policy and process should be, somebody could write an initial draft of what we think it should be, and then we can use that for discussion across the repo.
So was there any existing process that was followed, or it was just mostly voluntary?
Basically, I think it was generally people who were on the TSC, and then a subset of people on the TSC who volunteered would be in the triage group.
Okay.
If you look, at least now you can look at here. Let me find that. If you look here, you can see who's on the lists.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Right, and so the triage reports, basically long history. Rod and Ben have actually, I think, been doing the bulk of the work. With a few of the other people, having put up their hands saying, "Hey, can I be on this list?" in the intervening time, but there's no, we have not written down, "Hey, this is the specific characteristics of, do you need to be on the TSC? Do you not need to be?" and so forth. But so I think if you want to take it to the next step, write a proposal, and then we can get all sorts of discussion and see if we can come to consensus on it. For the team with access to the security issues, that has generally been the TSC. And again, the TSC was chosen as kind of a, we have a certain level of trust, confidence, and knowledge of the people who are in that group. So it was, okay, if you're already acting in the TSC, we have enough trust to be able to let you see all of these security issues. We need additional reviewers. So, it needs to be bigger than the triage group. And I think on sort of a one-off case, we've added some other people who were either helpful on specific issues or I forget there was no, again, documented thing. I think that list, so the team with the access to the security issues, there has been some discussion in other places. Like, I think there may be an issue in the TSC repo you could go take a look at. I mean, with HackerOne in place, it may be easier to invite people. Right. So we may actually remove that, make that list smaller. But how you choose that smaller list, like you might say, well, it's just the TSC who are there by default because, we need people who can look generally at them. There is sort of the aspect of you don't want that list just growing and growing and growing, and you could argue that the TSC has a responsibility to make sure the list is properly managed, so maybe that's why they should see it. Right. And then anybody beyond that would be added into specific HackerOne issues.
Right.
you know, that's, but again, that's one where we just need to do the work to define what we think it should be and discuss it, and, you know, end up with a document that says this is the way it is, and that's what we'll start to follow going forward. And the third list, which is the people with access to the security patches, the main variation on there might be that, you know, people who are actually doing releases need to be able to have access to the private repo. So you need maybe the reviewers who would review the specific PRs, but in addition, you might also need the releasers who can actually do the releases, even if they're not in the TSC and so forth.
Right.
And again, you know, go ahead.
Is there currently an actual distinction between access to the issues and access to the patches?
I think what Sam can clarify, I think it's a different list, but I think it's just through history that it's different.
I think it's just through history, and I think there's also, I think all TSC board members implicitly get access to the one list, but not to the other or something.
As org owners?
Yeah.
Because there is an issue to, like, I think we landed it that org owners would only include the TSC chair, board representative, community committee representative, and I think the education director from the foundation, and that would be it. So that might change at least the you know, the org owner side of things. It may not change that we want it to be the same list as it is today in terms of TSC participants, but
I think Colin actually looked at this. And you know, there's some, Matteo was, Kalinas was the one who brought up, he says that he has access to, he doesn't have access to the place where the private patches are prepared, but that he is on this.
So that's right.
He hasn't responded to, last time I saw, to any requests for follow-up. So
was that Matteo you were talking about?
Yeah, Matteo.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect he's one of the more recent additions to the TSC. It may just be an omission kind of thing, right?
Right. I just, yeah, I think it's I can't. Nobody seems to think there's any reason, you know, rational reason that these two lists.
So yeah, I think, and thanks, Michael, for adding that link to 358 in the TSC repo, because that's a good place to go read up on what's going on there as well, and existing discussion.
Yeah, it's not proving super satisfactory to me answering that question, but it is good background.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what, you know, from our group here, what we really just need is, again, people who are interested and will invest the time to make a proposal and stick handle the discussion around that proposal to get to the point where we've documented something. Because I do believe that it should be documented in this repo. I think that's where we've chosen to document all these kinds of things, even if they're implemented somewhere else. So that's kind of a call for a volunteer if anybody's, you know, got the interest and time to try and push it forward. Otherwise, you know, the discussion will happen organically. But if we have somebody who can champion it, that would be, make sure it would move forward faster.
So we're just talking about identifying that policy pretty much as you described earlier, and then making that as a PR against our security WG repo?
Yes, like we could start by saying, well, this is the current policy, and or, you know, or you could say, well, here's, you know, I started with the current policy, but this is what we recommend it should be, and PRing that in.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that.
Okay, that sounds good. And yeah, and if I got anything wrong in my description, I'm sure people will correct us. I think that's a good way to start. Okay, I think we're 1 minute over. So let's just look, and I think that was the last issue on the agenda. Anything else people want to talk about before we call it for today?
No.
No? Okay, thanks. Does somebody want to volunteer to PR the minutes in from the Google Doc?
Michael will do that.
Okay, sounds good. If you have any questions or need any help doing that first time, let me know. But otherwise, sounds great. Okay, so I guess the next meeting is, I forget whether it's 2 or 3 weeks.
It's 3 weeks.
Just check. It's 3 weeks? Okay, so the next meeting is I'm just trying to find it.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's scheduled for Thursday,
it's the 30th.
30th November.
Yeah, it's the week after.
Okay, so just for everybody's awareness, that's the next one, and we'll talk to you all then.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.